section at the bottom if you have questions during the presentation, and there also is a chat box. So just to get you acquainted, if you want to go over and click on the chat box, and then there should be a little panel at the bottom that says all panelists. If you click on that, you can select all panelists and attendees. That way everybody here can see your comments. And then if you wanted to just go in there and tell us where you're joining us from, that would be fantastic. So perfect. So from here, let's take a look at the agenda today. So we have, first we're going to run through some introductions, and then we're going to look at construction management at Columbia School of Engineering, as well as an overview of the entire diploma course. And then from there we get into the meat of the presentation with AJ, who's going to be talking to you mainly about the first course, and then week 1 and week 2. So see a couple people here. Hi, Brandon from Trinidad. So perfect. Let's jump right into some introductions here. Okay, perfect. So we will start off with Professor Ode. So unfortunately, Professor Ode could not join us today. I'm actually filling in for him. He had a family matter that he needed to attend to. So either way, I will introduce him to you. He is the founding director of the Global Leaders in Construction Management in the Civil Engineering Department at Columbia University. So Professor Ode has tons of experience. He's very well connected in the construction management industry, both in the US and abroad. And he has not only a wealth of knowledge, but he brings forth a wealth of connections, as you've already seen in some of your first videos with some of the guests, in the first module, sorry, with some of the guest speakers that he's incorporated. So, and then, and then we have AJ. So AJ, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. AJ Rowan here. I have the distinct privilege to be your course leader for this diploma. And hopefully, I'll be a big resource to you all. I fully anticipate that everyone will take as much, make as much use of me as possible. That's what I'm here for. And just to give you a little bit of my bio, so I'm a senior associate at Bechtel Corporation. Bechtel Corporation is the largest contractor in the US. We do work all around the world. We've been in business for over 120 years, privately owned, 5th generation leadership. So, we've been everywhere. We've done everything across all sectors. And I, for one, have had the privilege of being able to experience many of that as well during my career. I've been working with Bechtel for over 10 years. I've worked overseas in Australia. I've worked in Canada. I've worked in the US. I've done oil and gas work. I've done power generation work. I've done transportation and mining down in Latin America. Now, I previously had worked in engineering construction side of the business, working on projects, which I love, doing construction and engineering and project management. And since getting my MBA at the University of Virginia, I have been working more on the finance and development side of the projects, which this diploma program is great because it touches all the various elements of a project, from the very upstream side to where you're going into conceptualizing a project to all the way down to operation and maintenance. And hopefully I can bring to bear much of my experience across that value chain to everyone who's in this course. Just from looking at the conversations thus far in the discussion board, it looks like we have a wealth of experience and a diversity of views, and that's going to be a real asset to everyone, including myself. I'm going to be learning a lot from all the students as well. So that's enough about me for now, and we'll be here for you and try to answer any questions you have over the course.
Excellent, thanks AJ. So let's take a quick look at construction management at Columbia University. So Columbia University is obviously a very well-established, very prestigious university, and they do offer construction engineering and management programs there. So a few of the degrees, they have a departmental certificate, as well as master's degrees, professional degrees, doctoral degrees in civil engineering with a concentration in construction and engineering and management. So within those degrees, they also have focus areas in the built environment, specifically looking at planning, financing, procuring, constructing, and managing. So these are the topics at Columbia University within their program, and these are also many of the topics that we're going to be touching on in our diploma course with Columbia, as AJ mentioned. Okay, so now we'll take a few minutes just to look at the participants in this particular course, and here we see where we're coming from. We clearly have a very diverse, experienced group of participants, which is excellent. So you can see a little bit of the demographic breakdown here, about 35% from the United States and Jamaica, Qatar, Croatia. You can also see in the chat that we have other people from Russia, Egypt, Mexico. So it's going to be a really great course with all this geographic diversity. And then we also have diversity in terms of where participants are coming from in terms of their industries. Civil construction being the largest pool here, and that's followed by energy. And then we also have participants that come to us with a background in real estate and IT services. And then work experience. So we have some very experienced participants. The largest plethora of work experience that we have is 15 to 19 years, which comprises 38% of participants. So that is great. And then that is followed by 10 to 14 years, and then 20 to 24 years. So we have some very experienced people here, some great peers to learn from. And I think that's only going to add wealth and great things to this course. Okay, so before we jump into the first course material, let's take a look at the diploma overview. So the diploma consists of 4 courses, and right now you have started the first course, which is construction project management. It had the orientation week, which everyone has already gone through, and then it has 8 weeks of content followed by a break week. And then we'll move into course 2, which is all about construction scheduling. It also has 8 weeks of content followed by a break week, and that starts on September 5th. And from there, we go into construction cost estimating and cost control. And this module is slightly different. It runs over the Christmas holidays. So we do have 2 weeks of holiday break. Not exactly at the end of the module, but near the end of the module, and course, and that starts on November 7th. And then we move into our final course, which is construction finances, and that follows the general model of 8 weeks of content followed by a break week, and that starts on January 16th. Then we have our capstone project, which ties everything together, and we have 2 weeks for that, and that project is going to comprise of key learnings from each of the 4 courses that you've previously done, and it's a great way to cap off the course and finish strong.
All right, so I'll take it from here. So how does this course work, right? So, the way I think about this course is in 2 separate buckets. You have the modules, which contains all the content that you guys will be tracking and engaging with regularly. And then we have the live sessions. We are obviously currently in a live session. The live sessions are comprised of both webinars and office hours. For this course, we're going to have 2 live webinars, this being the first, and the second one being further back in the coursework. And then we're going to have weekly office hours. Each one will be 60 minutes. And really the purpose of this is for me to be able to engage with everyone around the world and help provide some context of my own experience to different subjects that are addressed during the course, as well as just answering any and all questions that everyone has. Really, I think that for me personally, this is where a lot of the richness can come to light. I've gone through a lot of the content in this course, and I can just tell you from my own experience, there's reading the content and just doing the assignments and writing and reflecting, but there's a really, a depth that's not apparent upon first glance. And so because everyone comes with their own experience working on various sectors and various industries, I think these office hours will be really beneficial, as well as a discussion board, for everyone to be able to bring to the conversation their own experience and really try to make the content of this course much richer. So anyway, again, just going back through this again, courses, modules, as well as the live sessions. Live sessions are webinars and office hours. And please engage as much as you can. Really, this course, it's you get what you put into it, and that's what's really exciting about it. All right, so one of those two was the modules. So here is the modules that are contained within this course. Obviously, the course being the first of 4 courses of the diploma. All of this is available to you on your syllabus, so it should be familiar to everyone so far. Week 1 is the construction industry overview. That's where we are presently. Next week, which will open up on Thursday, you'll get to dive into the fundamentals of the project development cycle. I can tell you it's an exciting week. There's a lot of really, really interesting insight contained in there, and I look forward to having that conversation with everybody during the office hours. Through the course, you're going to touch on, I'll just kind of briefly step through it real quick. Week 2, fundamentals project development cycle, as I say. Week 3, surety bonds and introduction to lien theory. Those two don't necessarily pair perfectly together, but look, we had to put it somewhere. And so we're going to address both those seemingly disparate topics in the same week. Week 4, we're going to touch on the sustainable development and safety practices. One of the exciting things about week 4 is we're going to do talk about LaGuardia Airport and their sustainability efforts on the project. It's a very big project, high profile. Then on week 5, we're going to do technology trends in the construction industry. I know some of you have experience in BIM, so this will be an opportunity for people who have experience with some of the leading technologies available in the infrastructure space to talk about it and what works and what doesn't work and what still needs developing. Week 6, we're going to take an international view of construction projects. Again, this is a wonderful opportunity for those who have international experience to be able to talk about how work is done where you've done it. Because I know from my experience, construction and engineering seemingly are the same, but when you actually go to different cultures and different places, different geographies, the work is done very differently. Week 7, project manager and project logistics, and then wrapping it up with project planning in week 8. Now, spanning most of the course is this case study that you'll be introduced to next week. This is called the Second Avenue Subway Project. We're not going to go too much into that right now, but I think everyone will be introduced to it next week, so we can touch on it there. All right, as for the live sessions, kind of already touched on it a bit. We're going to have one each week, the office hours, and then we're going to have on week 7 a webinar and an office hours. Really, again, going back through this, it's an interactive platform. It's meant for us to have dialogue. We can chat via the text box, or you guys can send in your queries to me in advance. I'm going to try to pulse everybody in advance so that or during the discussion, so that way I really know where everybody's at and how we can best utilize the time together. Again, I'm here for everyone. So to the extent that I'm not touching the various important points that everybody would find value in, please course correct me. There's really no use in everyone shying away from wanting to address the things that are going to be most valuable to you in your learning journey and your career. So by all means, try to engage with me as frequently as you see fit. Assignments. So what would be a course without assignments? Uh, this program offers you various types of assignments. You have, as many of you are already doing, the discussion boards where topics and prompts are provided to everyone, and we ask that everyone sort of respond with your own point of view on the topic. I know this week we're talking about the program versus project versus construction manager roles, and I've read the comments thus far, and I can tell you everyone's thinking very deeply about this, and so happy to talk about that as well here. But that just gives you a sample of what the discussions look like. And then as for the assignments, you're going to get a variety of different assignments throughout the course. Some of it's written, some of it's just quick little exercises. You'll see as you go through what those are like, and the whole course wraps up with a final quiz. I believe it's something like 20 questions or so, and you're going to go through and answer multiple choice on various topics that were brought up during the whole course. And that's about it. It all sums up to 100 points. So please stay on it throughout. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. Happy to clarify where clarification is needed. I know I had questions when I went through the different assignments, so I fully expect that there'll be questions from some of the folks around the world. All right, so I've been kind of touching on this a little bit, how to get the most from the course. This is just best practices from Emeritus and myself. So here's some pro tips. Basically, there's 3 buckets. Don't get too far behind, interact with classmates, and put it into practice. So don't get too far behind. Really, you got to stay up to date. These are spaced out into weekly increments. That's a reasonable pace and cadence for everyone, I believe. I know everyone's got busy professional lives, so fully understand the challenge of being able to dual hat things. But please stay with the content, because again, the live sessions are going to be very much on a rolling basis. So to the extent that you get behind, you're not going to know exactly what we're talking about in the live sessions, despite the fact that they are recorded and posted online. It's better if you can just engage with it in real time. Interacting with classmates. I went and had my MBA at the University of Virginia, and one of the things we really valued was class participation. Because in one hand, you learn from lecture and the teacher and the textbooks, but really a lot of the learning happens with your peers. Why take an online global course if you're not going to leverage the experience we have from folks in Nigeria or Trinidad or Hong Kong and Croatia, Mexico, and the US, et cetera. So please, many different points of view, many experiences brought to bear. Please, interact with one another as much as you possibly can, and be friendly with one another too. And then lastly, put it into practice. Many of you have the opportunity that you're working in jobs right now that pertain to construction management and projects and infrastructure development. So, this is a great opportunity for you to actually apply directly what you're learning in this course to your work. So please test it out and then give feedback. Share with the group what you've done and how you've applied it and what worked and what didn't work, or how might it be done better. If you have questions about that as well. Kelsey, did you have anything else that you wanted to add on this part?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay. So where are we? Again, sort of taking the high level view, we're in the first course of a 4-course diploma. We are in week 1 of course 1. So we have 8 weeks, as we already stepped through. Week 1, construction industry overview. We're going to just sort of take it easy as we step into the program. This week, some of the key learning outcomes was being able to describe the roles and responsibilities of the construction manager, the program manager, and project manager. We want to be able to compare and contrast manufacturing versus construction industries, and how are they similar, how are they different, as well as describing the life cycle of typical construction projects. So those were the key learning outcomes. I know that those are touched on in the lectures as well as in the assignments. If we want to talk about those during this session, I'm happy to do so. Key activities, as we went through, there's the videos, discussion, quiz, assignment, and the live webinar, which we're doing today. Looking ahead to next week, the fundamentals of the project development cycle. Here, you're going to compare and contrast the various types of construction contracts. You'll learn more about that: cost reimbursable, lump sum, unit price, a lot to talk about with contracts. You're going to compare and contrast the project delivery models. Here, you're going to have a lecturer, guest lecturer from McKinsey & Company, who's going to provide some insight into how McKinsey engages with customers around the world and helping them determine what delivery models work best for the type of projects they have, and how McKinsey and others go about developing a project delivery model. Really interesting stuff. Definitely applies to what I do in my line of work. Again, I will just emphasize there is the content in 2-dimension as you see it in the lectures and in the notes. Then there is all the richness and depth that just can't feasibly be touched on in a single module. So I encourage everyone to take different terminology, take different topics, and do your own sort of desktop research, or reach out to us. I'll be happy to provide resources to share that would give you more information if you so choose to take a deeper dive in any particular area. Really, we just sort of touch, briefly and sort of into each one of these things, but you could study these things for years and still not get to the bottom of it. Again, we're going to be introduced to the case study, which is the Second Avenue Subway project. This will span the full length of the course and will be due at the end. And you can see the syllabus for more details on that. Okay, so we're wrapping up on the sort of presentation part of this webinar. I wrote some questions down for everyone to consider. I believe there's some poll questions that were put out. Kelsey, maybe I could, lean on you a little bit to understand how the group is being able to engage with that. But I know I had a few open-ended questions here. One, do you have any issues regarding Canvas? Oh, I see a poll pop up right now. So that's how it's happening. Kelsey, can I have you sort of help steer this a little bit on this poll section?
Absolutely. So the poll is here for all participants to vote on. It's just giving us a little bit more information about your background. And so you go through and you'll select which construction industry is most interesting to you. And then you'll be prompted, excuse me, to the next poll question. And then the, excuse me, and then the open-ended questions that we have here are questions that you can answer in the chat. So if you have any questions for AJ specifically, or anything that you want to see, any questions for him, or if you're having any issues with Canvas, we do want to know about that. So you can go ahead and write it in the chat, and then we can either answer them right now, or if you're just answering one of AJ's questions, then he'll have that content available to him. So that's kind of how this is kind of a dual question and answer session with everyone. So that's how it will work. And we do invite you to answer the questions both on the poll and in the chat.
So Kelsey, I see I can't vote on these polls, which sounds right. How will I be able to see the results of the poll? Will it pop up once when it's closed?
I believe the results will be sent to you via email. Okay.
Because I would like to address, is it possible we could do that in real time so I could sort of see the?
Yeah. If people could write in the chat to answer as many of the questions as they can, and that will give us information in real time. And there we go. Okay,
we're good. I'm assuming people can see the results of the first poll question, which is, so I asked everyone which segments of the construction industry most interest you. Looks like we have a lot of people, the majority, 64%, saying It's heavy civil. I will just quickly, I'm seeing Eureka can't submit poll answer, but saying industrial, building, and residential. Okay. And we have define heavy civil, please. I'll do that in just a moment. Yeah, we only have one question in the poll thus far, so I'm going to just hit these chat questions coming up real quick as they come in. So only one poll questions come out so far, and we had 11 responses. Of them, heavy civil was the most voted. So, okay, I'll just talk real quick about the heavy civil portion. So before you let's go ahead and do this first. Let's go ahead and answer this next poll, and then I'll go into the heavy civil side of things. Just make a note to myself. Everyone should be seeing the first poll question pop up, which is, which topics from week 1 would you like to learn more about during the webinar? These were the topics from week 1. They should be familiar to those who have gone through the content. Okay, is there a chance to be able to close out that poll, get the results? All right, got 10 responses, and it looks pretty evenly distributed, uniformly distributed. I would say the leading one was Introduction to Construction Project Lifecycle. No problem, we can touch on that. And then in second was the Introduction to Program Project Construction Management, which is the part of one of the assignments this week, is discussing your point of view on that. Sure. So let me just make a couple notes to myself here. All right. Let's see here. So why don't I just go ahead and touch on this a little bit, and feel free in real time, you can put your responses and questions and flag things in the text box. Happy to sort of address them as they come in. So let's talk about the first poll, which was, which of the construction industry sectors are you most interested to talk about? The top one was that everyone voted on was the heavy civil portion. If you recall, in one of the lectures this week, you were introduced to the various construction sectors. The 4 of them that were provided are the residential, meaning your houses, buildings, which includes like commercial buildings, high rises, warehouses, etc. The third is heavy civil, and the fourth is industrial. So, I think everyone clearly understands what a house is. Most everyone here should understand what a building is. In terms of the distinctions between heavy civil and industrial, I'm happy to break that out a little bit. I actually studied construction management as an undergrad with a concentration in heavy civil. So heavy civil is the work of highways, bridges, dams, tunnels, various transit systems around the world. It's about, I think it's 30% of the industry is heavy civil. And when we talk about 30%, we're talking in the trillions of dollars around the world. I still work in the heavy civil sector. My work right now spans both the heavy civil and the industrial side. So heavy civil, you're thinking about highways, massive equipment, big, broad, stakeholder and reach. You're very much tied into the community and very macroeconomic view. So, What's also included is ports and, much of the infrastructure that sort of underpins society as we know it today is really what falls in the heavy civil category. Now, in terms of industrial, that's more like process facilities. You can go from oil and gas refineries. You can go to liquefaction export facilities. You can go to even factories or power plants. You have, what else would you have under industrial? You have big agricultural processing facilities, big fertilizer plants, on and on and on you go. I think you get a sense for where industrial is. I mean, it really depends on where you're at around the world. I grew up in Arizona. There wasn't much industrial work in Arizona, but when I went to Texas, you see much of it around big refineries and facilities to process natural resources. Hopefully that answers the question. And yeah, look, I'm glad people are interested in that because I have a lot of experience to bring to the heavy civil side of the work, and we can definitely go as far in it as one wants. The second poll is project lifecycle. I think people, of the topics that were covered in week one, where would we like to hover over a little bit and try to take a deeper dive during this live session? The two leading topics were the understanding the project lifecycle a little better, and then secondly, understanding the distinctions between program manager, project manager, and construction manager, which I'm really glad that was brought up because frankly, it's confusing to a lot of people, myself included. So it's good that that was also noted by the group. So first things first, let's talk about project lifecycle. In this stage, when we talk about project lifecycle, what we really mean is like moving from the conceptual phase, dreaming up a vision or a purpose for what it is that a project needs to be for, or why it is that you would need a project to begin with. So going from the conceptual phase and then moving into the sort of planning and the designing of the project, and then into the construction operations of a project. So the way the course teaches the project lifecycle is to break it up by architectural, engineering, architectural, and construction. But again, it spans beyond those three pillars. It goes both to the left where you go into the development side of the work, and it goes to the right where you deal with more of the operation and maintenance of different infrastructure assets. And to sort of break that out a little bit, we have, I think in the summary slides of the week one, they provide a more fulsome explanation of each of the various stages. But again, just at a high level, and you'll see this when we do your first assignment on what is it called? Designing the first sort of big assignment, which is designing your dream house. I think everyone's been introduced to that so far. I believe so, yeah. And so the idea there is, again, there's a purpose in mind. Maybe you've acquired some land somewhere knowing that there's gold in the ground. And the purpose is you want to be able to extract the gold, process the gold, and then be able to sell the gold to the market. Or maybe you want to build an apartment building. And the idea there is you want to provide housing in a particular area, and you want to be able to receive rents over the course of its life cycle. But the first things first, you have an idea, and then you go about sort of, how do we go from idea to then execution? And the next step is when you go through the conceptual phase, you go and commission different consultants and third-party advisors and engineers. You design the structure through an architect and an engineer, early stage. You perform break-even analysis, economics to see whether the project is feasible, both technically and economically. And when you move the progress from early engineering to detailed engineering, you're then able to start to shape some bid packages, which then go out to contractors for them to be able to scope and price the project accordingly, so that contractors can reasonably price the job and bid it, and then be able to perform and execute the work to the specifications that were generated during the engineering phase. Once when the project is constructed, it goes into the commissioning stages and turnover back to the owner. And then it moves into the operation and maintenance stage, which could be very much, 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, whatever the asset life is determined to be during the early conceptual phase. So that gives you a high level view of what it's meant by the engineering, architectural, construction phases. Now let's move quickly. Well, let me just do a quick glance over here. I want to finish out my thing about the program project manager. I'm looking at the time here, so we got 20 minutes or so left. Plenty of time to take a deeper dive. So let's talk about the program, the distinctions between the program manager, the project manager, and the construction manager, because I know this has been a point of confusion to some, myself included, and anybody else who works in the industry. So I guess let's just start from the bottom and work our way up. Bottom meaning just in terms of the closeness to the work, not necessarily hierarchy. I think many people in their discussions are talking about hierarchy. They see the distinctions between program, project, and construction manager as a distinction in titles and prestige, perhaps. I would challenge that to some degree and say that really it's just a distinction of where you are in terms of how close you are to the work, to how high up you are in looking at the work. Construction managers are dealing with merely the construction phase of a full project life cycle. So again, going back through what we just described from early stage development and conceptualization all the way to operation and maintenance, construction is just one stop on that line of activities in the process of developing a project. So the construction manager is tasked with being able to reasonably scope the job and be able to execute the work, a discrete deliverable that is, and under, on schedule, under budget, and safely to the quality standards that were specified in the project. And that's, when you're managing the construction, you're managing the portion of the work that is bounded by those two, by the beginning and the end, between the engineering and the operation and maintenance. Quite simple. I think most people can reasonably understand the construction manager's role in the wider scheme of things. Project manager, however, so the distinction between a project and a program is primarily that a project is temporary in nature, meaning it has a finite, time period, beginning and an end, and it's a discrete deliverable. Okay, so again, we go whether you begin in the very beginning, the conceptualization phase, or all the way to operation and maintenance. You're talking about one structure or one deliverable. Let me backtrack and say one structure. I don't necessarily mean just one physical structure, but one budget, one schedule, one set of specifications for a particular project. All right. Now, within that project, a project manager is having to deal with all disciplines, all functions. It's a multidisciplinary task. So, as a project manager, you're focused on the full life cycle of the project. You're involved during the early conceptual phase all the way to the operation and maintenance oftentimes. People may switch out that title over the course of the project, but nonetheless, that project manager is tasked with overseeing the work throughout the full life cycle. Now, stepping up to program manager role, this is where you're dealing with multiple projects and you're doing it in the service of a wider vision, not necessarily a discrete deliverable. So the best way to crystallize the distinction between these three is thinking about an airport. Many of you have likely been to an airport in your lifetime. You can easily, imagine in your mind what that looks like. So if you think about a growing market, let's pick somewhere in, you know what? They've recently done some Bechtel's recently finished an airport in Oman. It was in Muscat. And so you have a country that's made a decision to their airport capacity was becoming strained, so they decided to build a new, massive, brilliant airport. And the idea there was, look, we want Oman to be a signature nation, and we understand that airport's key to that. Transportation of passengers. We can build a hub regionally. So there's some wider goals at work, and so they're going to then build an overall airport, expand their existing airport, build a new one. Now, what does that include? Well, that includes a new terminal, new concourses, new runways, new parking structures, new roads leading into the airport. So there's many projects within that one program. The program being the expansion of Muscat's aviation center. So a program manager in that instance will either be working for whoever the sponsor is for that company, whoever the sponsor is for that overall program. It may be the government, it may be some agency that's overseeing the air travel or transportation in the country. It may be a private sponsor, private owner. There are private airports in the world. Regardless of who that owner is, there is usually a person or a team of program managers who are tasked with making sure that Muscat and Oman go from what their current state is, which is a smaller, strained passenger capacity, to a bigger one and a more prestigious, iconic one. And so they then break out the program into its constituent projects, and either they can hire one contractor to do all those projects, or they can farm them out to many contractors. But the idea there is that the distinction between, there is no time, the airport program is not necessarily time constrained, nor is it budget constrained, and it's not scope constrained. They could decide 2 years into it that the airport is going to be triple the size than what they had previously envisioned, or they can scale it back. So it's much more flexible in its definition, the program level, than the project level. Once when you say you have a project, that's fixed. It's decided that this is what it is. It's got this scope, it's got this budget, it's got this schedule. And it can change, but it's going to be amended through a change order or some other alteration, and then it's going to be refixed back into place. But it's never just open-ended in any way, shape, or form. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit. I will post somewhere in the discussion board a link when everybody finishes their own contribution of a really good article that was written about the distinctions between these three things through the Project Management Institute. And hopefully that clarifies things a little bit further. Okay, so I see there's questions coming in on the chat board here. So I'm going to go back through these real quick and make sure that I'm addressing them with the time we have remaining. Kelsey, is everything good right now, or should I be aware of anything?
Yeah, everything's good. I do see that Maxime, I hope I'm saying that correctly, does have a question specifically about documentation during the delivery phase. So he is talking specifically about this course and whether we're going to be comparing contract details between different countries. So I can address that question. We don't at any point in the course really delve into any sort of contract details for any specific country. The course is more based around learning general topics that can be applied anywhere in the world, as opposed to looking at specific details about each country. He said that he was looking specifically at a US versus European approach, but I don't know, maybe you had some comments about that based off your experience?
I mean, documentation during delivery phase in every country, I guess I would want to understand what documentation they are thinking about. Because there's many forms of documentation, whether it's, as you say, contractual or technical, or financially. So there's, one of the things about, let me take a step back real quick and just emphasize, projects in general are very document heavy. The reason why projects are so document heavy is because you have many, many stakeholders involved. It's rarely the case where you have one entity that will perform a fully integrated project on their own, in which case the requirements for documentation are little because there's little reason to require documentation to then prove to somebody else that something's being done. So the reason why projects are so document heavy is because you as a project sponsor will engage many, many, many stakeholders, whether it be third-party advisors, contractors, different banks, whether you have like investors or whomever is involved in helping to shape the overall project. They all have to come to agreements, mutual agreements, as to what this project is going to do and how it's going to be done. And so that comes in the form of contracts, many, 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 many contracts, being able to define the terms and the conditions of the agreements amongst the different parties. It's spelling out exactly what the technical specifications are, what the baseline assumptions are in a project. All this stuff is critical, and critical to get right, because the last thing you want is for a stakeholder in the project to have a different idea of what's required and what the purpose is of a project than the others, because then no one's going to be talking at the same level, and there's going to be mass confusion, and oftentimes it leads to significant litigation. So in general, I will just say that documentation on projects is probably one of the heaviest that you'll see in the industries, whether it's it's project-based or non-project-based. Project-based work is very, very document heavy, primarily because you have so many different stakeholders that all need to come to an agreement on how the work is going to be done and what is the purpose and what are we going to do with the project in the end. Okay, in our first assignment, can we do a flowchart type of submission? This is for your house, I believe, your dream house. Kelsey, do you have a view on whether a flowchart type submission is, I'll just say real quick. I mean, I think a flowchart's excellent. I think everybody should bring to bear whatever, they think is valuable and how they think about things. But I would say that from my experience, a typical flowchart is a little bit cryptic because it'll be just either single words or very, very brief descriptions within the flowchart boxes. So if you're going to use a flowchart or supplement your assignment with a flowchart, I would advise that you provide a substantial description of each of the stages in the process flowchart, either below it or footnote it somewhere, so that way we can reasonably be able to follow exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I was just going to say the exact same thing, AJ. I mean, as long as you're able to meet the standards laid out in the rubrics in terms of addressing the questions, then I think a flowchart would be okay. But you'll definitely need to leave space for a good amount of description so we can make sure that the full understanding is there and it's not just a couple words sprinkled throughout.
Right. We've already had someone submit a CAD drawing of what their house is going to look like. So I think people are bringing in some unique perspectives. Okay, so I believe the course is open for challenge. The approach of each area where construction is developed, we must consider that places will have different stakeholders as well as legislation. We should not base ourselves at U.S. approach, but bring the approach while each is facing the moment in order to share experiences. In terms of time frame, how do you look to finish the airport in Oman? Okay, so yeah, well, first of all, to your larger point, absolutely, you need to have an international perspective. I am an American. I was raised in the U.S., so you have to understand that I come with certain prejudices and biases that I'll try my best to avoid, and my world outlook is shaped by sort of where I come from. But I very much try to embrace and value a multicultural viewpoint, a more global viewpoint, and my work experience and life experience is such that I try to bring in as much from around the world as I possibly can. That's why I joined Bechtel. That's why I went into the line of work that I'm in, is because I love that. My wife is Russian, so I feel like I have enough cultural diversity in my own experience that hopefully I can bring some of that to bear. In terms of the time frame of how long we look to finish in Oman, we are finished. We just turned it over, I think, late last year. So that's a big win. It was a very, very big project, very challenging project, but that was a very significant win. Please post all questions in Q&A window. Got it, thanks. So the Q&A window, do I click on? Okay, I got questions in the Q&A window now, okay. Sorry, I was advising people to put their questions in the wrong place. I see 2 questions. Oh no, it did, it popped in both. Okay.
I think we're actually up to date on questions at this point, unless somebody else would like to ask AJ anything.
I have the Ask Me Anything. Really, everyone here is adults, and I trust that everyone can, manage their way accordingly. But really, ask me anything you want. I want to be a resource to the group. To the extent that I have a good, response, I'll provide it. Where I don't, I'll, tell you, and then I'll go back and do my own homework and see if I can provide a better, more informed answer. Again, I just really want to emphasize to the group, this course touches a lot of material. I mean, the infrastructure space in general is so complex. That's one of the reasons why I find it so exciting, is because it's very dynamic and it's very complex and multidisciplinary. So, it's certainly no expectation that everyone's going to be able to fully absorb the depth that's going to be available to us in the studies. So, I encourage everyone to do as much as they possibly can, to dig as deep as they can, and use me and the team as your resource. I'll put this somewhere in the notes. I did note that in the lectures, a couple different books were mentioned. Oh no, excuse me, a couple different signature global projects were mentioned. One was the Panama Canal, another was the Brooklyn Bridge. So there's actually 2 books, both published by the writer David McCullough, one that addresses the Panama Canal construction, the other one that addresses the Brooklyn Bridge construction. I've read both of them, and I would highly encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about those projects. And it gives you a lot of historical context, but it goes really deep into the civil engineering and construction of some of the most iconic works in the world, back at a time when they were very much a pioneer. Also, there's another book that's, because this is a Columbia course, there's a lot of New York centricity. A very, very big book that I don't expect people to read during this course is called The Power Broker. It's about Robert Moses, and he was the key person who basically built New York in the way that we currently see it, with much of the infrastructure that we see it. That's another incredible book, won the Pulitzer Prize. So for those who want to take a deep dive into sort of the infrastructure, civil engineering literature, there's a good book for you as well. Let me just do a time check. We got 5 minutes remaining. Kelsey, is there anything that I should do or be mindful of?
Yeah, if you open up your Q&A box, it looks like PMR has just posted a question for you.
Okay, is there a difference between PMI kind of project management and construction management methodology-wise? It's really interesting. I'll write down the book recommendations for sure too as well. So yes, I'm a project management professional, and I personally really think it's an incredible certification, and I encourage those who are interested to go and pursue it. If you have industry experience, you're probably 85% of the way there already to getting certified. I tend to think there is a distinction between the PMI kind of project management and construction management that you're seeing in this program. Theoretically, there's no difference. I just think that the emphasis on different particulars of the project management framework is just more nuanced in the construction management. But I would encourage everyone here personally to leverage Project Management Institute resources where they can, because although it's not industry specific, it applies to projects both large and small, And whether it's developing software or building the Hoover Dam, it applies, and the framework applies. Obviously, with construction, you're dealing with more specificity and nuance that may not apply so much to software development or other types of projects. But I encourage you. I think there's a lot of overlap, and I think that using PMI is going to be quite helpful in this course.
And it looks like Adam has also posted a question I think might be good one to end on.
Sure. So Adam says, in your opinion, do you see issues with the next generation wanting to be in the trades? If so, what are your thoughts on how to change that? I do. I absolutely do. And you got to ask yourself, why would one want to go and join a trade these days, knowing that your work is, number one, it's hard, it's uncertain, and it's not, it's, in my opinion, it's not, doesn't carry a lot of respect and honor in the public's eye, which is completely off base. I mean, I have the most respect in the world for the tradesmen that I've worked with over the years. It's extremely hard work and extremely proud work. The unfortunate thing is, one of the interesting things is, there's studies been done that says that if you were born into a family that had an iron worker as your father, or you had a significant relative who was, a close relative who was in the trades, you were like, 90%, I'm just approximating here, but like 90% more likely to join that trade, being that you grew up with it, than others would in that space. And so to me, that's telling, because it's basically saying that there's not a lot of entry points for other people in the world to join in. And frankly, I could see why. It's not, you're working as a tradesman, you're having to be very mobile. You work for a couple weeks at a time, perhaps, and then you're off to somewhere else. You don't get treated, you don't work in the best conditions. So I think the best way to change that is to professionalize the industry. And one of the best places to look at for how that's done is in Australia, where you have really strong union structures. And through that power of collective bargaining, they're able to have a seat at the negotiating table, and to be able to negotiate better conditions for their work, whether that's pay or on-site facilities, break times, clothing and tools and equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So the benefits are much better when you work in collective bargaining environment than otherwise. The more disaggregated the industry is, the less power the individual has, and the more likely that the large companies will take advantage of that. All right. Well, I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to having more of these discussions through the course. And again, this isn't the end of the line. If you have more questions or want to follow up, you can reach out and use the discussion boards accordingly. And if you have ideas for what kind of polls we should ask next week, please provide that as well. I'm here for you. So whatever you think works best, I want to fold into the program. All right.
Great, thank you everybody for attending, and there will be a recording available. So great, and then as AJ said, you'll have plenty of opportunities to interact with him again. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.